Hey Chris, how you doing? Thanks for joining us.
Hey Adam, good to be here.
So 10 years, Plotly 10-year anniversary, and you've been with us since the very beginning. How does that make you feel? Like what are thoughts that run through your head when you think about 10 years?
Yeah, it's tremendous. I'm really proud of what we've built over the last 10 years. And thinking back to the early days, like startups are perilous enterprises, right? Especially at the beginning. And we kind of all know you know, uh the failure and the success rates of companies that make it past 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years. And so to make it to 10 years and have a really solid business that has great customers and good financials and able to continue growing is just tremendous. I'm really proud
Yeah.
of it, and 10 years is a huge milestone.
Yeah, the odds are always against startups, so it's amazing we were able to make it this far with such a promising future as well that I know you'll talk about at the end. Can you tell us a little bit more about your journey, especially the early years?
Yeah, so I was still in school at McGill University in Montreal, and I was doing research in electrical engineering and math. And Jack and Alex were building out the first version of Chart Studio and the Plotly graphing library in their spare time outside of their own working hours. And I was using an early version of the prototype that they were building for the research I was doing. I actually have a couple of graphs that I can share from the early days of Plotly in Chart Studio. Um,
Yeah, see
are you
them.
able to see this? So these are some early graphs of Plotly. Like these are some of the first charts on the platform. You can see indeed 10
10
years
years.
ago. Um,
Wow.
and yeah, I was starting to create graphs for my own research with a tool that they were building, uploading CSV files from my Python scripts into Chart Studio, creating these graphs and sharing them with my researchers and my professors. And it was just so clear that this was such a better way of working with data and working with graphs by doing it in the browser, right? I mean, the status quo at the time, and still is in many places today, of like taking a screenshot of a graph and emailing
Right.
it to somebody, and it's not interactive, and you can't actually see the data behind it. You can't interact with it. And so it's so clear, like even just in the early days of Plotly, how much of a game changer this was for communication and for doing science and engineering. So I was using it a lot very early. And then the summer came around. Jack moved to Montreal where I was, and I started contributing to the code base. And we raised our first round at the end of that summer.
Okay, so you started contributing to the code base. You saw there was a lot of potential there. We got our first funding opportunity, and then I'm sure that felt like exhilarating, exciting. Where did you go from there?
Yeah, I think there was this big milestone that we achieved that summer, which was kind of our first original launch of the
Hmm.
product. And I still remember that night really vividly, where um, we're building Chart Studio, we're adding new features, we're building new chart types, and then one night Jack was like, "Well, okay, we're going to share this on Hacker News." And of course, it's just like I feel like, especially when you're working on something early, like it's never ready. I mean, even still today, right? Like things
Right.
never feel ready. They can always be better. But Jack had this sort of amazing ability to push things through. And to make a leap, and he did that that evening. um, and I think he just put it up there, and we were looking at traffic on Google Analytics, and it was just started spiking. We were seeing tens of people before, and then suddenly we're seeing thousands and tens of thousands of people
Oh
visiting the
wow.
website. So we folded up our laptops and we rode our bikes down to this great bar, LC's in the Plateau in Montreal, and sat up at the bar and just kind of had our laptops open and responding to comments, seeing all the new signups come in, seeing all the visitors from around the world, and seeing a lot of enthusiasm for what we built. Um, and and that was a really big early moment for the company. It was like, wow, this thing is real. There's a lot of excitement around this. There's a lot of appetite for much better data visualizations in the web browser and adding, more shareability to that and
Yeah.
collaboration. And now that was just such a huge milestone in the early days of the company. And sometimes that feels kind of like the moment that the company really started for me.
You should every 10 years, maybe even make it every 5 years. You should do a reunion in that bar in Montreal with those people and celebrate again and again.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, so you got and it was. Does that mean that Plotly JS and the Plotly Graphing Library was already released at that point?
At that point in the early days, for the first couple of years, it was all integrated into the product. So there was no separate library. It was just part of the Chart Studio product. You could create the charts using the graphical user interface on the web. And then we built an API for Chart Studio. And that was an API that you could you'd use in Python, or we built lots of different wrappers for it in different languages. And you would describe your chart in the API, and then it would actually create it in your account on Chart Studio. So we weren't distributing the graphing library in the package yet. It was just an API service for creating charts. And that was really cool because when you create the graph, you could immediately share it. Like when you type like plotly.bar chart, it would return a URL for you. It wouldn't return like the graph, it would return a URL. You'd open the URL, and that's where you could see the graph and you could share it. So that was the early days of the company. Later, we unbundled things so that you could use the graphing library independently, and we open sourced that a couple of years later. And then, that's kind of where the open source roots of the company began, when we started unbundling things, making them available within the Python library directly. And then kind of expanding our vision into the developer first in data science world.
And so, Chris, what would you say? You said the first milestone was that a little bit after that funding, and then when you saw so much interest, thousands of people suddenly flocking to this product that you created. What would you say, as the years passed and other products were created, what would you say was for you is this second milestone?
I think there were many big milestones in between this one and the one I'll share, but I think the next big pivot for the company was when we introduced Dash. We had for years kind of focused just on the visualization side of things, just the graphs themselves. And we expanded that universe in a really big and wonderful way. And that is the Plotly that most people know, is that graphing library behind our namesake. And we had a huge community around it, and people were really pushing the limits around what you could do with an individual chart. We introduced subplots, and people were starting to make basically what looked like websites with a series of charts, annotations inside them. And if you squinted, you were like, wow, that's not a graph, that's a website. And we started introducing like sliders and drop downs into the graphs themselves, so you could like hide and show different elements. But it was clear that our community and our customers were starting to push the limits of that abstraction. And that's when we started to think about, okay, maybe we can expand our vision beyond graphs, but to websites or web apps. But still keep the emphasis on the Python interface for creating these websites and in web applications. And that's where Dash was formed. And there was a lot of appetite for that interface. And there was a lot of ways that the Dash abstraction enabled our customers to go a lot further with their data analytics within the organization beyond just individual charts. Because instead of just publishing a chart, now they're publishing workflow applications or publishing dashboards and data applications that update very dynamically and every day. And they're actually really driving business operations rather than just looking backwards at a chart at one point in time. So that transition around 2017 of the company, when we went from being a graphing library company into being a data app company, was a tremendous milestone and a tremendous shift for the company.
And I'd like to hear more about the process of creating Dash and then like releasing Dash. Did you get that same kind of sense of there's a lot of excitement out there and there's going to be a lot of people wanting to use this as you had with Plotly and the graphing library?
Yeah, absolutely. I wrote a very early version in 2015 or 2016. that was very rudimentary, and I open sourced that. And you can actually go back into the Git history of the Dash repo and see the very first version that's written with jQuery. React was hardly a thing back then, and but kind of just put that out there to see what the interest was. And there'd be like GitHub issues coming in here and there. And I started giving some talks around the world showing off that prototype. There's one talk I gave at the Python meetup on Wall Street, and I could really see the kind of like the glimmer in people's eyes around this product and this prototype. And it was a challenging thing at that time in the company because we were kind of straddling two products. Like we had Chart Studio, we had our customers there, we had this amazing community, we had the open source community that we were building, and that was driving the revenue and funding the operations, but then also had this idea about the Dash interface, and there could be maybe this new layer of abstraction. And so it was tough balancing those two things. I would kind of work on the prototype in 2015, took a year off, kind of worked on the next version of Chart Studio, kind of came back to it. So it was kind of simmering, for a long time. And then we launched PlotCon, which was our first user conference, also on Wall Street. And we sold out. We had an amazing lineup of speakers. It was this beautiful space on Wall Street with this huge floor to ceiling, like 60-foot window in the background looking out over Manhattan. And when we planned that conference, I told myself, I was like, I'm going to give this talk on Dash. It's not ready. It's just sort of a glimmer in my eye. We have this very rudimentary kind of smoke and mirrors prototype, but there's something here. And it's 4 months away. And like, I'm just going to go heads down and build this thing out and present it and see what the response is. And so that was one of the big moments around Dash, was giving that talk. There was definitely certain things in the prototype where it only worked if you wrote it a certain way, and only clicking on certain things worked, but it was enough to show kind of the potential of this product. This talk was received really well, and we sent it out to all of our customers and our community after, even if you couldn't attend the conference. And a great champion of the company, Andy Alexander, who worked at BP at the time, saw that video and was very excited by the potential of this for his organization. And he, in this organization, were able to sponsor a first real version of Dash.
Wow.
And that was enough to kind of go to our board of investors and say, hey, like, this is an idea, but it's got legs. Like, people are putting up real money for this. And we're going to, I'm going to go off and build out the next version of this. And we'll launch it around, that was about a year later.
So that's another big milestone. Okay, so now you have Dash, but that's slowly. But then slowly, when did you all make the decision to develop Dash Enterprise, and I mean, how did that look like? Because that changed the type of users that we have, right?
Yeah, we had Chart Studio Enterprise at the time. It was called Plotly on premises. So we had a really great user and customer base at the time that were really supportive of our work, and were getting a lot of value out of our software and how we were delivering it. So in the beginning, the Dash Enterprise server was an add-on to Chart Studio. And it was called the deployment server at the time, and we provided application deployment and authentication, and we provided that in the first version. So that was really important for us to release both the open source and the enterprise platform at the same time. It's so clear, kind of working with these customers, our amazing customer base over the years, where the libraries is one thing, and there's a lot of innovation that goes there, but all of the enterprise capabilities around deploying applications, authenticating them, having security scans on them, like really actually running them within an organization, has as many hurdles as building the application itself.
Right.
And so we really wanted to see this technology in the hands of our customers, and had this strong conviction that we need to remove whatever barriers there are in our customers' way to get these applications running within their environment. And so releasing the enterprise side of the platform, was as innovative and as important as the application framework itself. And those two really needed to go together. and our customers have really benefited from having the platform complement the framework and vice versa.
And so as we grew, our users grew with us, as well as the way they use Dash. What have you learned from our users through this process?
There's been a lot of stuff that has been, super incremental. I think, the first version of Dash, the component set was pretty limited,
Mm,
and but the abstraction in the framework itself was flexible and powerful enough to handle a huge wide range of use cases. Things like the DCC interval component, so where you can have applications, graphs, and tables update in real time on the app. And
mhm.
that was one thing that we didn't release in the first version, but the abstraction enabled those types of interactions and those types of components, while keeping kind of a very uniform and consistent API across our entire component base. So it's been really cool to see all of our customers using this framework in real serious production applications across industries. And that's what it was built for, but it's still like every time I go on site to a customer or customers are showing us what they've built, I guess I'm very honored, to see the software being used in these environments. I was talking to a customer the other day who's running it. They've got a control room that's running literally 24/7, operating and monitoring heavy machinery in the wild. And there's operators that rotate in and out of this control room. And previously, they had bought a lot of off the shelf heavy equipment monitoring software that isn't very customizable. It's not very tailored to their use case. It's very off the shelf. And over the years, they've been slowly swapping out this sort of off the shelf software with Dash versions that they've built themselves that are very tailor made to their use case. And now their control room is half off the shelf software and half very bespoke, very customized internal Dash applications that are monitoring heavy machinery. And these things have been running for years. They haven't gone down. Alerts pop up when there's issues with the machinery. They're augmenting it with predictive analytics to look at different failure cases. It's very cool. It's very real, and it's driving a lot of real world operations. So that's what Dash was built for. But still, every time you see it out there, it's an honor.
Yeah, I hear that a lot from the open source community as well. Like what I like most about Dash, they say, is the customization. Like I can do anything I want with it, which is so makes it so powerful.
Hmm.
And I remember when I first joined Plotly, and I still hear it every now and then. Although I'm more in the open source world, what I was most proud of is the fact that major companies around the world that are trying to create very positive change in the world are using Dash, right? Companies within the renewable energy field, for example,
Hmm.
wind energy. It's just amazing that they're using what we build to help improve the world. It's something that I'm, proud of whenever I think of my work at Plotly.
Hmm. Yeah, it's really cool being a platform builder, being a tool builder, um, because in some days it feels like we are employees at each of our customers' organizations, right?
Right.
Anybody at Plotly could have had a career being an application builder, software developer, support engineer, working at any of our customers, helping run their internal application teams. But instead, we're able to build abstract and powerful and customizable platform and framework that anybody can use. We can license that to customers, and in ways we are kind of part of each of our customers' organizations. That was I think back to that a lot, where my career could have been building internal applications. That's what it was in the beginning, and now being able to do this at such a broad scale is I'm really proud of the work that we've done in that area.
What's your favorite thing about working at Plotly?
Wow, that's a great question. I think it's seeing working with our customers, seeing what they're building with our software, building new features and products to help them out and get them excited and drive outcomes at their organizations. That is so exciting, and that's been my favorite thing from the early days, like when we got our first user, and that's still 10 years later is my favorite thing.
Because it's tangible. You like you can see your own the fruits of your creation of the tools.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, it's really satisfying to build quality software and
Right.
see customers use it in real ways and do things that they couldn't do before. Um, I think that's one of the really innovative things that we do at Plotly is we lower the barrier of entry for creating these applications. For so many people, this is like the first website that they've ever built, and that's so exciting, right? And I think there's this really disruptive thing here where if you can lower the barrier of entry and lower the learning curve enough to be able to create your own software, then you don't need to rely on buying off the shelf software. And you can build your own software that is very tailor made to your own
Right.
internal organization and practices and operations. Um, and and that's like what everybody would want, right? To have software that's very tailor made to their workflow. But that is only possible if the barrier of entry and the learning curve is
Slow.
reduced enough where that's actually possible. And that's kind of like the relentless pursuit that we're in at Plotly.
I my first Chris, my first website was with Dash, and most of them since it's pretty much with Dash, if not all of them. And not only that, eh, I think I learned Python because and through Dash. So we're giving audience members the opportunity, not audience, community members the opportunity to learn or getting a good reason to learn Python by working and building with Dash. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah, it's very cool.
We talked about the past, right? When we first started with Plotly, you shared about your journey. We talked about the present of how people nowadays around the world are using Dash open source and Dash enterprise to make the world a better place. And so, my last question that I'd like to end with is, what are you looking forward to in the near future with Dash and Plotly?
Yeah, great question. I mean, there's still so much product work that I'm excited about for us to continue to lower the barrier of entry to enable more and more users and more people um, to participate in creating very customized, very bespoke, powerful internal applications. And we've done that at a really great level for a certain segment of users. And I think being able to continue to lower the barrier of entry to enable more people to participate is what's really exciting. And there's a lot of huge shifts in technology that are happening right now that could even accelerate that at a broader way. All of the new generative AI work that's being done has the potential to really lower the barrier of entry for folks that are getting started with programming and all of the flexibility and capabilities that you get when you start working in scripts instead of UIs. So there's so much work there that is still awaiting us, and a lot of broader technological changes through the AI world that is going to come directly into our product suites, either enabling folks to learn the software easier and learn scripting easier, or incorporating that technology within the applications themselves so that their end users of the applications can benefit with more powerful features and benefit from applications that can do more on behalf of the user. So yeah, this whole next era of where Dash meets AI is going to be tremendously exciting. And in many ways, I feel like we're 10 years in, but we're still just getting started with bringing data applications to organizations around the world. So I'm just really excited to continue on that journey.
A thrilling future to come. Thank you, Chris, for sharing your journey with us, and all about Dash and Plotly in the last 10 years. To the next 10 years.
The next 10 years. Thanks, Adam.